Yeah, if we're really seeking, then it behooves us to open ourselves to receive. And a pilgrim forges out and says, I'm seeking something, and then they're open to see what they receive. They don't have a preconceived notion of what they're supposed to get.
Welcome to the Anyplace podcast. I'm your host, Robin Nisbet. In this next episode, I speak with Dr. Tobi Fishel, PhD, an integrative health psychologist, along with her spouse, Marc Weigensberg, MD, a holistic pediatric diabetologist. We speak about dream sharing, deep listening practices, ritual and ceremony, and the indigenous medicine inside of Hebraism. This is To Be a Pilgrim. What do you practice?
I'll just jump in and say every morning for almost a year now, I dance. And it's been transformative for me to, given everything that's going on in the world, I was so bereft. I needed to move the energy and also reclaim joy. I had to be in my body and reclaim joy. And that does that. It's 21 minutes. 21, I don't know, that's just the magic number for me. And I made my own playlist of every song that I just love. And slow songs, fast songs, Motown, spiritual songs. And so I dance every morning. And I also, every morning when I take Maggie, our dog, for a walk, I thank grandfather, son, for being there. And that was a practice that I learned from an indigenous healer, Martine Prechtel, which is every day remember that it's not guaranteed, right? So I thank grandfather for showing his face and breathing the air into me and showing up again. And it's a very profound, it seems mini, but for me it's a very macro practice of remembering that every day is not guaranteed. And so thank you for another day for me to be here. Those are two practices.
Probably my main practice is my night school that I go to. In that, probably for the last, 4 or 5 years, I wake up almost every night, not every night, but almost every night, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. Try as I might sometimes to get back to sleep, I can't. And I have to go into my study and sit in my big chair, wrap myself in prayer shawl, and sometimes just read, sometimes read from sacred writings of my spiritual tradition, and sometimes meditate and often pray. And I'll do that for an hour, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes less. Usually until Tobi wakes up sometime and comes to get me and reminds me that it's still the middle of the night and I should go back to sleep. And usually I do. I'll go back to sleep at that point. But I call it night school because I feel like at first I was concerned about it, like it was insomnia or something. And then I came to understand that it was a time to be in the quiet, in solitude, in the quiet of the middle of the night, and with spirit, and came to understand my ancestors and the ancestral tradition. This was a thing that was done in the middle of the night. One would get up and pray and then go back to sleep until the morning and then get one's day started. So I feel like I've kind of found my way into that practice.
And your ancestral spiritual practice, will you talk about that?
So I was born up Jewish. Both my parents were Jewish. My grandparents came from the old country in Poland on the one side and in Ukraine/Russia on the other side. So this was a practice that I've come to understand was very present. I mean, hundreds of years ago through the Middle Ages and then into 1700s, 1800s among mystical sects of Jews in Eastern Europe. I've come to appreciate those times in the middle of the night when I can just be in that.
Do you think there's something specific to it being about nighttime that is generative for this kind of prayer practice?
I feel there is. I feel there's a quiet in the night when the world is asleep around us. There's not much going on. There's not much external noise. Sometimes there's the noise of a mockingbird that's in our backyard, that's nesting, and they'll often be singing at night. But otherwise, it's just a time of quiet when I feel one can connect to spirit and source and self in a way that sometimes isn't as possible during the regular day, although one can find those moments, certainly. I've certainly done that, and I know many people who do have meditative practices and do it at other times. But it seems a special time for me.
If I could add that often you'll go into also dream time, so it's a time where you could go in and out of the dream time space, which brings other kinds of intuition and knowing and lessons, right? So that's a part of it. And given that we're both also academically trained, conventional academically trained, we looked this up, of course. We're like, what's going on here? And there were some articles that we found called the Hour of the Wolf. And like people actually write about this, that there's a time in one's life, especially when someone becomes an elder, where in the middle of the night, a time when spirit, source comes through and teaches you things that you need to know and bring to your people. And it's actually called the Hour of the Wolf. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with you. Keep, even though it's annoying, keep doing it because this is important. So it doesn't happen to me. I get downloads during the day or in dreams, but this is what he's been doing for a long time. So Hour of the Wolf.
Hour of the Wolf. Amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up dream time because Tobi and Marc, the first time I met you was through Giovanni, but at Adare, and there was a dream sharing practice after council. And will you talk a little bit about the importance of dreaming and dream sharing in your life?
I want to start with saying we do not share dreams from a psychological perspective, which was a huge unlearning for me because I'm a psychologist, right? And so we are trained to look at what neuroses you have and what anxieties you have, and certainly some dreams are personal and are about that. However, there are so many dreams that when you start sharing them, you see a theme of what's coming, what dangers we're in. So we've been trained now to learn and look at dreams from a spiritual perspective and a community perspective. So, all indigenous cultures that we know, that we've learned about, have a time, usually the first thing in the morning, where before you go and do anything else, you actually gather and share whatever dreams came through, because the dreams are telling you there's danger. Black Elk speaks in that book. He had many dreams that were nightmares, really, right? They were telling him of the white man coming and what was going to happen. So he saw that in dream time years before the invasions of our native brothers and sisters. So we've learned to look at dreams as right ways of living, what maybe is misaligned with how you're living your life, and how to straighten it up so that there's more life-giving rather than destruction. And the more we've been doing that and sharing, the more we see that our dreams actually have a theme that's going through maybe over years. And if I just write down my dreams, I'll forget them. Years later, though, if I've been sharing in a dream circle in a community for years, someone will say, what you just shared, you shared 10 years ago. And now it's even more, the images are more horrific and they're more dangerous, and what is happening here? And so we see a through point of messages that maybe we would absolutely not see on our own, but each other, we're carrying the dreams together, and the dreams come through not for me. I might carry, we call it carrying the dream. It came through you, but it's not Tobi's dream. It's what does the community need to hear? What does the community need to know? So For instance, one that I had years ago was stop all poison. That was daunting. What does that mean, stop all poison? It was not a personal dream. I shared it with the group, and then we all started talking about what kind of poisons are we putting in our mind? How do we share poisons through our words? What poisons do we have in the earth? It's a daunting question, but I sit with it. I sit with it every day. How do I stop poison? And it changed my life. That one dream, that one billboard, changed how I think about everything I do, say, feel. Don't put poison out there, ever.
Yeah, I guess I would just add that by sharing dreams, it also helps one to fix it or plant it in oneself and remember it. I also have dreams, and then even if I write them down, I'll forget them. But if I've shared them in community and other people have acknowledged them, and maybe the message in the dream that was not just for me, as Tobi said, but was that really a general message for the community and needed in this time, it helps, and then it helps to guide me to understand what's happening around me and to live in the right way. I mean, I'm thinking of basically a minstrel-like character who came and was singing songs of joy and light and love in a time of oppression, in a time when the forces that had power were suppressing and arresting and making people go away. And yet he was singing these songs and the children were learning them. Even when he was taken away, the songs remained with the children. And so in times such as we're living in, I use that dream to keep my light alive and keep me walking forward. And bringing what I need to bring, and living a life of joy and love, no matter what, because that's what's needed to come through.
I wanted to talk about Passover Village and to say that I think at one point during one of the councils, maybe that Giovanni held or something, I asked you, Tobi, would you adopt me as like my Jewish family, because I have...
That was so precious. Oh my God.
Because for my personal spiritual practice, it's so important to have connection to my ancestry. And on my father's side, my Scottish lineage, it's very easy to access that. But there's been a lot of rupture on my mother's side, in particular with her mother and that lineage, the Jewish ancestry. And I feel so ignorant around the practices, Judaic practices and traditions. And I could see the way that you both practice. Didn't know very much, but I could just see the way you practice in your life, your commitment to your path, to your purpose, to your spiritual practice, to your community. And so when you invited me to Passover Village this last year, I was like, I have to go to this. It's really important. And it was so beautiful. It was 3 days. Was it 3 days? Yeah. 3 days in Joshua Tree in the desert.
It felt like a year.
A year, yes. A year within spiraling of time. And days of council and ceremony and being on the land. And I was wondering if you would talk about its origins.
Yeah, sure. I guess that's for me.
Years ago, yeah.
I think Passover Village was birthed deep in the redwood forests up in Northern California. It was at a conference for men and women who had gathered with a number of spiritual and life teachers, elders, to deal actually with gender-related issues, and gender reconciliation was actually the purpose of the conference. But what ended up happening was that the groups at some point actually split into ethnic and racial groups, wanting to sort of explore our own connections to Earth. We were doing a lot of Earth-based ritual around gender issues. We were holding council every morning, storytelling, time out in the woods, and ceremony. And so at one point, after the sort of division into specific ethnic and racial groups. A number of those of us from the Jewish lineage gathered and spoke about our own lack of knowing about our own earth-based tradition, that, people had various different experiences in their lives of their Judaism, some none, some very secularized, some whatever, went to Sunday school or had a bar mitzvah and then nothing else, but sensed something deeper and richer, and also something that had been lost over the millennia in terms of earth connection. And so the next Passover, we went out into the desert in Joshua Tree, hiked out into the back country, and rather than holding a Passover Seder around the dinner table one night for 2 or 3 hours, we went out for a weekend, and we camped, and we enjoyed the land, and we enjoyed the community. The idea was to create a village of celebration and connection with land and with spirit and with the tradition. And so we held a Seder one of the evenings of that event. Over the years, because it's been going on for 30 years, it evolved. And people came and went, and there, at various times there were different core groups, and we ended up, always purpose really was to explore and reclaim what we felt was a lost earth-based tradition within the Jewish tradition, and came to understand that as within the Hebrew tradition even, because before our ancients were known as Jews, they were known as Hebrews. It was really the name of the people. So that's been the exploration for 30 years now. And it's expanded to where, rather than do a Seder for 2 hours on a Saturday night, we actually dive deep into the Seder, which I see as sort of given to us by our ancestors. Seder meaning order. This is an order of a ceremony, and yet the content within the order can be somewhat fluid, and we've made it fluid, and we've done it with earth-based ceremony and with prayer and with ritual and building community and with children and with elders, and it's really evolved into a very beautiful experience, typically 3 to 4 days in the spring. And very connected to the earth, very connected with the time of the season, that this is a time of rebirth in the spring. So it's a time we go out to experience the elements of freedom within the Passover tradition, what it means to be a free individual in being, and what it means to be a being in relation with all other beings, not necessarily human, but plants and the animals that are in the desert, and various amazing experiences always happen with nature, be it double rainbows coming out after a little sprinkle of rain, or be it really healing moments for individuals during the weekend, but really building that village of cooperation and love and connection for the weekend to experience these Hebrew ceremonies and rituals that have been passed on, but maybe in a new way, in a new connection with the earth.
The first time I went was in 2015, and I cried for 3 days. And I'm from the Hebrew tradition, in the conventional Jewish way, and always was a seeker of deeper connection to source, to spirit. And it was always strange to me to go to temple, and I was the one who always wanted to go to temple, and everyone around me seemed to be reading prayers in a rote way, and I was like, I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it in my body, I didn't feel it in my heart, but I kept seeking. So I started seeking, learning about other traditions, because I wasn't finding it in mine. And then I met Marc, this wonderful man who, I had studied Kabbalah a little bit, the mystical side of healing for the Jewish tradition, and I studied Buddhism and Hinduism and many other things. And Marc one day said, that's all in our tradition. We used to dance around a tree in our tradition. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't learn any of this in Hebrew school. You don't learn that in the conventional way of Judaism. We've really lost so much of the richness. And so when I went to Passover Village, and we were singing and dancing around a tree and doing that kind of ceremony. And then to have Passover for 3 days where every part was slowed down, where karpas with the greenery. You didn't just dip the greenery in salt water and it was 2 seconds. It was, we're going to have a council about what are your tears about right now? What's going on in the world where you are grieving? So we're all sobbing, right? And then we go on to the next part and we have some kind of ritual and connection and discussion. And it opened up a whole new appreciation. And then I think I was sobbing because I was like, oh, yes, I knew that there was more to my lineage and my ancestry that's beautiful and important and teaches us things. And this is the way to get there, right? This is the way to get there. And like so many other indigenous, again, all the indigenous cultures, right? Modern times comes and takes away our connection to earth and makes us disconnected and shuts down the feminine and the matriarchy and the women dancing around the trees. And so we don't do that anymore. But that was part of our lineage. And so what I appreciate about what Marc has done with this group is reclaiming the mother, reclaiming earth, reclaiming the importance of joy, and that the prayers don't have to be a dirge. They can be singing up to God. It's quite something. And we have a different kavanah or intention every time. We had one that was honoring the feminine, and all of the women designed the whole weekend. All the women designed the whole weekend, and the men came to support the women. That was so profound.
Wow.
And this year it was blood and bones, and it was about connecting to our ancestors and our descendants, because we know, given everything going on in the world, we can't figure it out ourselves, right? So we were doing so many rituals to try to ask our ancestors, what do we do now? How do we get out of these wars? How do we create peace? And how do we connect to our descendants and say, we're doing something now. We want you to be proud of us, right? We're going to be active in every way we can to make things better right now. That was my experience.
Thank you. There's so many things you said. We've mentioned council a couple of times. Just for listeners, will one of you give a brief explanation of what council is?
I think of council as a practice that's been carried for millennia by all indigenous peoples in some form or other. But as I was taught it and as I mostly practice it, it can also be called talking circle or heart circle. But in the way we practice it is sitting in a circle so everybody who's involved sees each other. There's no hierarchy related to the seating arrangement. We use what's called a talking piece. It can be a stone or a stick or really anything designated so that whoever holds the talking piece is the one who is empowered to speak and everyone else is empowered to listen. And the speaking is, the intention is to be from the heart, and the listening is intended to be from the heart. So immediately when you're in that situation, you're in a ceremony. And then the language and the level of communication is deeper and rich, and you're not listening so that you can know how to reply, which is often what's done in our modern culture, but you're listening so that you really understand the truth of what's being spoken. There isn't crosstalk. There isn't interruption. The person who's holding the piece speaks what they need to say, what their heart is urging them to say, puts it down, and then the next person who needs to speak would do the same. You try to speak to the heart of what you're saying, so you try to really focus your language on what it is that the council group needs to hear. What's the pearl? What's the real thing that's coming through you that needs to be spoken at this time? That's the essence of it. Trying to be as spontaneous as you can, so that you're speaking to the moment, what's moving through you in the moment that you feel needs to be shared, and that the community needs to hear. I think that's the essence of it. And so we use it to discuss critical issues that the community may be facing. Often the council is not designed to answer a question as so much to understand it more, sort of move our understanding as an individual and as a community kind of down the path of understanding of a particular question or issue that may be present in the community consciousness at that time.
If people are listening and familiar with nonviolent communication, it's a way to really be nonviolent. I think it's a way to see that everyone has value and everyone's voice matters, and that hopefully by the end, something in ourselves has opened and our own lens has widened. Rather than trying to prove a point, it's about what can I learn here from everybody. So it can be used in any group setting. I wish we could bring it to Washington and teach our politicians how to do this. We do it in our own personal coupleship. We do counsel, and it's a way to really hear each other and not let things fester. And again, understand the other person's heart and where they're coming from. Also, I think premise is respect, kindness, love. It softens everything. It slows everything down. Rather than when we try to prove a point, we speed up and we're not listening at all to the other person. It slows everything down and opens ourselves to something bigger. I think it's a peace practice. I really do.
And this topic, blood and bone around ancestry, I heard a lot, and for me, in this inquiry around my own ancestral rupture, a lot of beauty coming in from lineage, and then also questioning and grief and hurt and heartache and sacrifice. And this element of blood, I was thinking about the staff, the redwood staff, that actually had a blood offering made to it in its making. Will you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, that happened at that conference in the Redwoods. And I think I neglected to say that conference was multicultural and multi-aged, so quite a diversity of people from different traditions, and that was part of it. And so at that conference, what was awakening in me was this Hebrew consciousness somehow. And I went walking off into the woods, and I just knew I had to have a staff. That's how it came through. And so I found on the floor of the forest a redwood staff that had fallen, a branch that had fallen from a tree.
Did you know it was going to be like Moses' staff? Is that what? I'm just wondering if that image came through to you.
That image came up because I know that image, you know. I don't think that I said I need a staff of Moses, you know, or quite like that. But a walking stick, a staff, I mean, that's present in many traditions, right? I mean, I'm thinking of the ceremonial staffs of Native American tribes, for example, or African people who would hold a staff. So it was just I needed to have a staff. And so here was this redwood branch, but it was quite too tall. It was probably about 9 or 10 feet. So I took it off into the woods and was going to whittle it down to, I don't know, maybe 6 feet or something like that. And so I sat on a log in the middle of the forest with nobody around and my knife. And with the first whittle, I sliced into my hand. And I just kind of looked at it. And then I allowed the blood to go to onto the bottom of the staff, what would be the bottom of the staff from that point on, and onto the earth. And I knew I was involved in a covenant with the earth and with the staff and with the spirit through that action. I wasn't really thinking. I was just kind of responding to what was happening. And it felt like an initiation, right, of the staff and of the moment. And then from that point on, I was able to stop the bleeding. Ultimately, the bleeding stopped, and I was able to complete the task of shortening the staff to a more manageable length and went back into camp. And we took care of the cut on my hand. had a friend of mine who was a midwife who was there, and then I had a friend who was a spiritual healer and shamanic healer and teacher. And with the two of them helping me, I'm a physician, and I had actually brought materials in my first aid kit, which included suturing materials. And we did a little ceremony where I actually sutured the cut closed. And that closed the whole ceremonial forming and creation of that staff. And that staff has come with us every year to Passover Village from that moment, which is where Passover Village was, the idea of it was initially born.
Will you, Tobi, describe one of the land practices that you offered to us, just to give listeners an idea of what being in relationship with the land looks like within Passover Village and an element that you've brought to it?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I want to honor Joanna Macy, the great teacher, and her work with the Great Turning, and I've done some trainings with that, and she has so many beautiful ceremonies to help people reconnect their heart to the earth, realize that we're all connected, and that in order to grow and survive, we have to take care of our mother, the Great Mother, first. And so many of these practices I actually bring from her teachings. So one of them is going out on a wander into the natural world with a question. And so one question was, see what moves you in the natural world. It might repel you, you might love it, but something that moves you in the natural world, and see if you can then spend time with that element. So it might be a tree, it might be a cactus, it might be a bird, it might be a bee, it might be lichen on stone, might be a boulder. But what draws you, and then spend time, ask the question, can I sit with you? Right? Realize that that's a being that you can be in relationship with. So not just sit down and take space, but, oh, I honor you, I see you, introduce yourself, have a whole conversation as if you would do it with a human, right? You wouldn't just hopefully interrupt somebody and get in their face. And we could learn so much about how to be in a relationship if we slow down, introduce ourselves, ask if we can be there. If you hear somewhere in your body, in your spirit, yes, then ask if you can learn from them and see what they want to tell you. And then what we did when we came back to our council was, can you share from the perspective of that being what you learned? And we've done this practice for about 3 years now, and we've heard from the lichen about how to slow down and how life is here for millions of years, and it might take another million years to move where an inch, but we'll get there. But it might not be you getting there, but it'll be your descendants getting there, right? So that was mind-blowing. And someone was a creosote tree, and someone was a bee, someone was the sun. You know, we heard profound teachings from all of these beings, and I think besides the specific teachings, what we learned was respect for the spirit of the natural world that maybe we certainly forgot, that all of these beings are alive, and where we can be in reciprocity with them.
Reciprocity, it's a big one. It's like the medicine, the anecdote for our capitalistic, our extractive ways of being in relationship with one another. We've gotten to a point sometimes where it's like we look at even like another human and we're like, what can I get from you? What do I need? On to the next thing, you know?
Right. So and part of reciprocity is making offerings. So we had this whole conversation about, if you have this conversation with a being, a human, a creosote tree, a bee, then thanking them for what they shared and then making an offering. You know, what do you need from me? And the offering might be a little water. The offering might be a song. The offering might be birdseed. There's so many ways you can make offerings. One of my teachers over the years said, if you have nothing else, cut some of your hair, pull some of your, I leave little bits of my hair everywhere as a thank you. And it might be a bird's nest, in some places, or a song. I'll share a song. So we have so much that we can offer that we don't realize on our personhood, in our bodies.
I think that also just speaks to really digging deep inside of ourselves and honoring our own wisdom and self-worth. Seeing ourselves instead of always looking to something on the outside to give us something.
Right. One of the great tragedies of modern times is demonizing women's cycles, right? Demonizing our menstruation and seeing it as a medical problem and not as a spiritual, amazing cycle that we're connected to the moon and all of that. And I felt that way. I had terrible periods and I hated it for years and years and years. And then I went on this incredible women's retreat in upstate New York, and a few of us were on our moon. And the leader, who was the most amazing person, spirit guide, she said, if anyone's on their moon, you are welcome to find places by a tree and offer your blood to the earth. And all of us looked at each other in horror at first, like, what are you talking about? We were hiding it. We were taking ibuprofen. We were trying to pretend we weren't on our moon. She's like, we want to honor everyone on their moon. And 5 of us raised our hand. We're all on our moon. And we all ran to a tree, we're offering our blood throughout the weekend.
Yes.
And again, now we're sobbing again because we are being honored and respected for the fact that we are bringing life, that we can bring life, that we can shed. Changed my perspective to my body, how I could honor my own uterus, whether I had children or not. And it's a miracle that we create blood and that we can release our blood, that's an offering, and that was welcome. Oh, yeah.
My Baba, my priest, he says that it's our blood as a woman, this is a blessing. He talks about the very same thing. And I've been making it a practice for, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. Of every cycle I have, I leave a blood offering to the earth.
Oh, so beautiful.
Sometimes I'm in a city and I'm like, how do I do this? So it might not always, I don't know how. Yeah. Trying to think.
It's tricky, right? Yeah. It can be tricky.
My auntie's house in Edinburgh, and I just go in the little backyard.
Can you imagine if we taught all girls, anyone who has a cycle, that it's a blessing and that we honor you rather than it's terrible, it's disgusting, it's painful, it's
a curse.
It's a curse. I mean, all of the words that we use around it. Oh, you can't do this and that. So you feel ostracized.
Yeah.
Rather than, no, actually, maybe you can be in a red tent. If you haven't read The Red Tent, everyone needs to read The Red Tent. It was incredible.
Yes.
Where women are actually honored and given time to be in their body and slow down, because you're not expected, or years ago, you weren't expected to keep on that fast pace and do everything for everyone. This is actually a time you could be with other women and not cook for everyone and not clean for everyone. Right? We don't do that. We pretend that that's not happening and we keep going. Even that's why we have headaches and that's why we are in extra pain, because we keep going. Yeah, I can go on and on about that. But that's another way to have a ritual, is to honor women's cycles.
So beautiful. Marc, will you talk about the directions? I mean, you're both such scholars, and the scholarly aspects of Hebraism that you've, in your own research around, it seems like it's this ongoing inquiry around how the indigenous practices of Hebraism, and also finding the correlation between these indigenous practices and other indigenous practices. I saw that during Passover Village.
So the four directions is I think, definitely a common theme or construct within any of the indigenous traditions I'm familiar with. It's really primary in a number of the Native American, for example, traditions. And I studied with a rabbi who really is working to bring, shamanic Judaism, as he labels it, Rabbi Gershon Winkler. He and his wife, Rabbi Miriam Marone, in a series of workshops I did with them, identified the role of the directions and the presence of the directions within the Hebrew tradition, which we are not taught mostly in Judaism, except perhaps circumscribed on the holiday of Sukkot, when we take the lulav and shake it to the directions. It's a harvest festival. And that holiday has a lot of earth-based meaning and intention in it, although my feeling of it growing up was that it didn't really come through. It wasn't really emphasized. It's kind of an interesting thing, but again, it's circumscribed within modern culture and modern civilization.
Wasn't it a minor? Like in my family, it was a minor, very minor holiday.
Yeah, Sukkot, although it was one of the major pilgrimage festivals in ancient times, it was not particularly celebrated, except, perhaps in, more religious Jewish households. But as more of a secular Jewish, Reformed conservative growing up, it didn't have a big presence. So, the directions for me are a way to understand one's place, both in the physical world and also, of course, that's a microcosm for the macrocosm of the cosmos. And different traditions put different meaning behind each direction, meaning, spirit animals, spirit keepers or beings, energies, etc. And that can be both specific within the tradition, and even within traditions there can be different meanings ascribed to the direction. So for me, though, the important thing is to be aware of ourselves surrounded by the universe, really, and that when one acknowledges the directions, one's acknowledging those energies and the place, your place within the whole, within the universe. And one of the things about creating space, which we did by acknowledging the directions, is to say, there's this great universe, this great presence, which we may constitute in our minds, or how we feel about as divinity or as divine or higher power, however we think about that. And also you can bring it into this space, and then this space becomes that. The great entire macrocosm is actually present right here, and by acknowledging those energies and the presence of those directions for around you, the up and the down, you're actually acknowledging the all, the greater all. I guess that's what I would say about that.
And a lot of people don't know that the directions have been in Judaism. I didn't. I only knew, looking at the directions with all the elementals like you're talking about, and animals, and maybe what each direction stood for, as when I worked with my Native American teachers. There was one in the Cherokee tradition and one in the Lakota tradition. But to learn that there was one in my own tradition again was, so there's grief that, why don't we know this? There's such great grief. I think that's the other reason why I sobbed the first time I went to Passover Village, because it's like, we have lost so much, and we can only bring back so much, and also joy that, we were so connected, and we can again be so connected to the universe and to the whole and to the earth. I think that's reclaiming that is so important.
Yeah, I feel there are parts in there, like, for example, the vision of Ezekiel, the first chapter of Ezekiel. He has a great vision, and in that he sees the chariot, the vision of the chariot, and within that are four beings in the four directions. The eagle and the lion and the buffalo, which is a Middle Eastern kind of water buffalo, right? Not so much the American bison, but still that family of being. And then the human. And Boy, I never learned that in Hebrew school, and when the people journeyed through the desert after leaving Egypt, they were arranged in a certain direction with the various tribes in the 4 directions. And even within the tabernacle that was built at that time, they built a dwelling place for the spirit. The various parts of the tabernacle were also aligned with the directions, so that the menorah was to the south, and the table which held the bread was to the north. And this also aligned with the winds. There are various aspects in the tradition that speak about the 4 winds, and that's also about the 4 that's, alluding to the 4 directions.
Is that what you brought up during Passover Village? Because I remember, we faced each direction and you named them in Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
Will you tell us what they are in Hebrew?
Yeah, to my understanding, so the east is Mizrach, which is the place of sun shining forth, the Hebrew root zarach. The south is Marom, place of the heights, actually. Also can be called the Negba, or the place of cleansing. So there may be more than one word for each direction. The west is Ma'arav. And these words are also used in modern Hebrew for the directions, but just meaning the direction, right? Without necessarily knowing that there's an ancient and deep understanding of Ma'arav, place of blending, really, where, for example, at the sunset, where the day blends into night, and where life may blend into death, and where the place of healing. And then the north is Safon, which is a hidden place. Sometimes that's thought of as a place where spirit might first manifest itself, or where the ancestors may bring us information. The upward direction we call Shemayim, the word for heaven, and this is a bit of, the indigeneity within Hebrew is in its language also. It's a verb-based language, which is true of many indigenous languages. Shemayim is a combination of the words Aish and Mayim, which is fire and water. So it's Shemayim, the heaven, is the fire water place. And you can think of that when you think of your next thunderstorm, when you live through your next thunderstorm. And finally, of course, the earth, the Adamah, or the Aretz, many different words for earth, actually, within the Hebrew language, in the place of grounding, the place of the Great Mother.
And Adamah, and when I first heard that from Marc, because I didn't know Hebrew, so I learned Adamah is earth, and I said, does that have anything to do with Adam? And he said, absolutely. Humans, Adam is Adamah, came from the earth. I'm like, oh, we came from the earth. Right? That is an essential component of the story that has been left out, right?
Understanding or remembering. Yeah.
Like literally remembering and metaphorically remembering. Yeah.
Wow. Will you also talk about the meaning of the vulture?
Well, this is also a teaching from Gershon, although I've also, since having studied with him, have meditated on myself and experienced it myself. And was once gifted, twice, I've been gifted with vulture feathers from our vulture relatives at times that were very significant. So there is a couple of lines in the book of Genesis, I don't remember the exact verse or content, but where the Great Spirit tells Abraham to do a ritual, and it's often referred to as the ritual of the parts. So Abraham makes a ceremony involving several different animals and offering them to the Spirit and aligning them and splitting them once, they have been offered into halves. And then it says, it depends on the translation, the Hebrew translation, the birds of prey came and he chased them away. But it's much more succinct in the Hebrew, which is a very succinct language and opens itself to many interpretations. But the word in Hebrew was ayit, which was translated as birds of prey. It was probably referring to a vulture, is my understanding and the teaching I received. And the hidden meaning was that not that he chased them away, but that he reunited them or brought back together, reintegrated the pieces as it flew through. And so I've carried that kind of understanding of vulture and vulture medicine, because what do vultures do but eat from those who have passed in order then to create new life? So that transition from death to life is part of the medicine that they carry. So, yes, on the top of the staff that we spoke about earlier, I usually have attached a vulture feather, one of the two that was gifted to me over the course of a number of years. It's a special being.
I just see all of these commonalities in traditions, and in Ifa, we talk about the vulture as being, we make this offering, and then the vulture might eat from the offering. So essentially the vulture is taking our prayers and elevating them.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So beautiful. It's a transformation, right? Life.
Yeah, and it's really quite something when you have these understandings from these traditions, and then you see those, the turkey vultures circling in the way they do, just kind of floating on the wind, and the understanding in many traditions that the word for wind also means the word for spirit. It's the same word, right? Which is true in the Hebrew as well as many other languages, to my understanding.
I was going to ask you both to talk about Miriam and Elijah. The goblet, the vessel of Miriam, felt really significant to me and helped to connect me with my mother's lineage. I could feel Miriam really strongly, and I was wondering if anything you want to share about Miriam and Elijah.
I love Miriam so much. Oftentimes during Passover Village, I carry Miriam's goblet, and the women do a water ceremony, and Marc has Elijah's cup, and Miriam is honoring the feminine energy. The stories of Miriam being a shamanic healer, and as they were in the desert for 40 years, she was the one who was the diviner. She carried music, and they followed her, and she would sing and have a tambourine, a tambor, which I have two, and one of them has a picture of Miriam on it. And she would find where the water was. And if she weren't around, they wouldn't have had water. So it was amazing that she could do that. And so in this tradition, the woman seer, the shamanic woman, they're honored, in that way. And so we always have during Passover, Miriam's cup is very significant, and inviting women to come up and bless the land and bless everyone with water is very beautiful. And again, I didn't do that growing up. I did that for the first time at Passover Village.
Miriam's cup has become a part of a lot of Seders, I think, in modern times in different Jewish communities, definitely. The recognition of the feminine that, was not acknowledged or emphasized and often put down in, what was a religion growing out of times when the patriarchy was eclipsing the matriarchal world back in the old days. And so the reclaiming of the feminine within the Jewish tradition is very important, I think. And one of the ways to do that is to honor the water bringer, the life bringer, in Miriam as the life bringer in all women. And so to bring that forward is really important. I remember our first Passover Village when we hiked out into the Joshua Tree. We didn't even go to a car camp. We actually hiked into the backcountry, like the children of Israel going out of Egypt and carrying everything on their backs and pulling carts and all that. That's what we did. And we got about a mile till we kind of just collapsed in a clearing and said, this is it. This is where we're going to do our ceremony. But at the end of the weekend, we hadn't gone through all of our water, and we had containers of water left. And it became obvious that the thing to do was libation at that point. It was a ceremony of libation and offering that water to, those plant relatives around us that had held us for that weekend. And yeah, so Miriam is the water bringer and the life bringer, and the energy of the feminine energy of dance and celebration and song. And so very important to honor her and honor that.
I think that one of the ways, in addition, that you have created a space to honor the feminine is that you invite and make space for the feminine voice and feminine sensibility. So it's not the men or the patriarchy doing the ceremony and women are just there. We're all a part of it, and we're all honored and equal. However you identify, whatever energies you feel like you carry, all of it is honored, which is not the case everywhere. So it makes it a really, really special and empowering for everyone, I think.
What I understood from experiencing Passover Village was that it felt like it wasn't just as you described Seder, a sort of traditional Seder or Seders that you.
It's not an event that you just do.
That you just, or you, go down the list. It's actually embodying each. I mean, there's still elements of like in Seder, you're taking something in. There's an embodiment practice, but I feel like being on the land, hiking a mile out, there's this embodiment piece. And when you talked about the teachings of the Kabbalah and the body, I was so intrigued by that. Will you talk a little bit about that? Especially because I have this deep inquiry around the pelvis, which I feel like in at least the culture that I feel like I was raised in, largely, not entirely, but I was aware of, maybe like we spoke about earlier, like our blood is bad, our period is bad. There's kind of this like, we cut off this whole area because it's sexuality is bad. These things are taboo, and sexuality means being in the body, and the body is really bad. It's kind of going back to this maybe like Judeo-Christian, even Platonic, but like certainly Cartesian idea that our cerebral abilities or analytical abilities are superior to embodiment. And so I was just so curious about these teachings of the Kabbalah around the body. And
well, yeah, I'm not sure where to start. I guess what came up for me as you were asking the question are two examples within my understanding of Kabbalah. And one is that the Kabbalah speaks, one of the main ideas is the tree of life, or the Eitz Chaim, which are 10 divine emanations, basically, and connecting from the spirit to the physical. They do have places on the body, and in some ways, as you look at them, if you're familiar with the chakra concepts of other traditions, they in a way align in such ways that, makes me wonder, were these traditions at some point in contact with each other, grow from each other, learn from each other, or did they come up independently and are just basically experiencing truth? So the Sefirot, they're called Sephira, which is one of them. So, for example, the sphere of Keter is the crown, so that corresponds, for example, to the crown chakra, right, in other traditions. But the place where divinity traditionally meets and enters, very ephemeral, very almost outside of the body, right? And Chokhmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, are represented by the right mind, right side of the brain, right side of the mind, left side of the mind, and so forth down. So you speak of the pelvis would be held in the sphere of Yesod, which is, has a lot to do with intimacy and sexuality.
And emotions, right? All of our emotions are there.
Yeah. Emotions to a great extent as well. The other thing that came to mind as you were speaking, and speaking of the pelvis, was just before we started this conversation and we were doing some breath work and body work, was as we were breathing the air through our body, down the spine and into the lower abdomen and pelvis. There are 3 Hebrew letters that are called the mother letters. And in the pelvis, the mother letter is the letter Mayim, or Mem, which carries the energy of the element of water, mayim. And so when we did that breath exercise, I was in my pelvis and my lower belly, squishing around all the water in there, right? It's like, because that's where the mayim is. And in the chest, which we have our lungs and our heart, is the element of air. And the letter Aleph, which begins the word avir, which means air. So when you breathe into your chest, you breathe into the Aleph, you're breathing the avir in. And in the head is the mother letter of Shin, which is the element of fire. If you breathe into your crown or you breathe up into your mind, you can imagine the excitation of all the neural transmitters and neural pathways, synapses, making their connections, transmitting, fiery signals and things like that. So there's a number of ways that the Hebrew tradition aligns with the physicality of the body as well.
And it's even, as you're saying that, it's amazing that it's come into our language without people even knowing it. So we call people hotheads when they're too fiery in their head and they're going too fast, right? And they're saying things that maybe aren't so kind. So we want to say, we're going to cool you off, right? Because there's too much fire in your head.
I can be a hothead sometimes.
So hothead, right? So it's just really interesting. And if you have so much air coming in and you need a little groundedness in earth, and so it's also a part of balance. Can we find balance and harmony between all of the elements? Are we too much in our head? Do we need to get into our pelvis? So the wateriness cools off our hot head. And sometimes we actually need to get things done and be in our head, right? So maybe we're too airy and too watery, and that also can connect to Ayurveda, right? Where we think about, are you Vata, are you Kapha, are you Pitta, right? So there's so many cross-pollinations of understanding and similarities between all of the big systems, I think, of truth, as you said.
Going out into the desert, having Passover village in the desert, and the first time that you went to Joshua Tree, you actually hiked a mile carrying everything on your backs or carting your belongings. Tobi, will you talk about pilgrimage?
Oh, such a great word, right? I've been thinking about pilgrimage for a few years now as I have a website called Sacred Journeying. It took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to call my website, and I finally landed on journeying, sacred journeying, because I'm a psychologist, and I believe that as we're growing and on some whatever healing path we're all on, it's a journey, right? We never really we're never going to get there, but we're always journeying, and I see that we're on an outward pilgrimage and an inward pilgrimage, right? And so pilgrimage is a sacred journey that we're taking to get to some truth, to get to a connection with our self, our maybe higher source, higher power. And so we could pilgrimage outside. So as we go to Passover Village, I feel like as we are just thinking about the intention, the kavanah, as Marc is putting together our list of food, that's all part of the pilgrimage, right? As we travel there.
As we're trying to get the lights to work for the trailer.
As I completely took that out of my mind. Yeah, we had so many obstacles. You were in the car with us. So many obstacles to actually get where we were going, and it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. We'd just get in our trailer and go, and we'd get there. And no, we had to stop here. We had to stop here, and we had someone else in the car who said, "Oh, I have an Israeli car mechanic who will be happy to help us get to something that has to do with Passover." I'm like, what? I mean, it was so spirit driven, right? And so the whole time we're laughing and we're frustrated and we're eating how many snacks, right, to get us through. We get there hours later than we think we're going to get there. And it was all in preparation for us being a community. It was all in preparation of us actually landing and being there. So that was the outside journey. Thank you for bringing that back. And we're also on an inward journey, right? Inside, how are we experiencing it? How are we taking care of our emotions? How are we feeling inside? Are we seeing this as part of our spiritual journey, or are we just seeing this as a pain in the ass and we just need to get through it, right? So we had to really keep telling each other and talking ourselves down into maybe there's a purpose here, maybe this is part of, we're already on the journey to get to Passover Village, we're already in Passover, we're already in the Passover experience. So, I'd ask everyone who's listening, what kind of pilgrimage are you on? What kind of pilgrimages have you taken? People go on the Camino. That is an outward pilgrimage that sends you into the most intimate. From my friends who've gone on that pilgrimage, it transforms you internally, right? So you're taking this one step in front of the other, and that takes you inside, where you are a different person when you are through. And so I see Passover Village, hopefully, as an outward pilgrimage that changes you on the inside when you're done. I hope that connected you to your ancestors more, that part of your lineage. It certainly did for me.
Absolutely. And now I can call on Miriam. I was looking for that connection, that link that I can find on my father's lineage side to root me in indigenous practice and to have a name. I just didn't, it was like, of course I've heard of Miriam, but it was like Miriam was revealed to me in this ceremony.
Right. So you had an outward practice and you had a pilgrimage, and then it took you on an inward pilgrimage. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. I'll also say that just the welcoming song and putting what is it called? The
Talid.
Blanket, the talid.
Yeah, the prayer shawl.
The prayer shawl over. It was like elders from this side that feels so ruptured, and for so many reasons. Just looking at my most recent ancestry, what has happened. It was like these elders that I had been looking for were surrounding me, singing to me, and welcoming me into something that I felt somewhat ostracized from. It was one of the most profound experiences that I've ever had.
I'm so glad that happened. I experienced that as well the first time I was there and I was welcomed. The power of ceremony can't be overstated, right? That we all hugged you when you got there and we said, welcome. But that's very different from a sacred, holy time where we intentionally do something to connect someone who's never been there before to what you're entering another space and time when you create a ceremony, right? You're altered and you're in it in a very different mind, body, spirit way. It's very beautiful.
I'm really glad to hear your experience too. It is profound to welcome someone new in that way, in a ceremonial way, and to be welcomed both. Experiencing your experience during that, it was profound for me as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just have one thing to add to pilgrim. What the word conjures up for me is also the idea of humility. It seems like when you're a pilgrim, you don't really know anything, right? And you're seeking something. So I think it's important to go into any pilgrimage or any journey or any experience with that sort of understanding of one's own humility and what one has to discover or seeking to discover.
Right, and I think that in the same vein that we have maybe a responsibility toward eldership in some regard, and that's a whole other conversation, I think that at any point in time, no matter how much knowledge we have or experience we have, we can return to that place of humility and sort of beginner's mind, if you will.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we're really seeking, then it behooves us to open ourselves to receive. And a pilgrim forges out and says, I'm seeking something, and then they're open to see what they receive. They don't have a preconceived notion of what they're supposed to get. I think that's, yeah, so I really hear you on that. Whether it's the Camino, whether it's Passover Village, whether it's a meditation, whether it's a vision quest, whether it's a shamanic journey, whether you're sitting under a tree and you close your eyes, whether you're dreaming, right? If you ask for a dream, don't ask for a particular dream. Ask for, right? Ask for what you need to know, and you're more likely to actually get what you need to know because you're open to it.
The Lakota say Unshimala. It's great, like Great Spirit, have pity on me. And in the Hebrew we say Koli el Elohim. I'm sending my voice out to the Elohim, to the gods. It's an interesting word for God in Hebrew, which is sort of, the Judaism is supposedly the, foundational monotheistic religion, and yet the creator, the word for creator, is a plural noun, Elohim. So take that to mean what you will.
And how many names for God is
well,
there?
at least 72.
72 names of God, so
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes.
Depending on the face of what the God is doing or creator is doing. Yeah, it's amazing.
But that idea of sending your voice out to that expanse and that divinity, because you don't know anything. I'm sending my voice in a psalm. It says, Etzaka, and I cry out to you. I cry out to you because I don't know and I need help. So that element of humility is really important. Yeah, no matter where you are, younger, elder, just born, in relation to the world and the universe, we're all just, brand new.
This next question is, it's a place that I'm in inquiry within myself, is deeply committed to my ancestral practices or some kind of relationship with ancestry, and also practicing from other traditional indigenous practices. And so how do I carry that with integrity and respect for these practices and for these people who have experienced incredible violence, but also violence against their spiritual practices, having them taken away in the most atrocious ways. And so it's a question that I want to be in conversation with, and not that there's any right answer around it.
It's an essential question and consideration. I so appreciate you bringing it in. Marc and I were just, for 5 days, we were with medical students, and we were on an integrative medicine retreat, and we did ceremony, and we taught all kinds of things about integrative medicine and also different practices. And one of the things we talked about was the difference between appropriation and appreciation. And I have had a few indigenous elders talk to me about that very specifically. And one is about respect. It's about talking about your own teachers. It's about saying who you learned what from. It's about respecting when someone was something maybe was you experienced maybe a ceremony, but it was for you and not to be shared, and be very clear about that. Or maybe you were taught a song and they said, please share it with the world. Then you were given permission, and you need to say that. I was given permission to teach this dance. I was given permission to use this sage. I was given whatever it is, and to very much respect what you're bringing, what you're practicing. And part of respect is that it's not taking advantage of anyone in any way, right? So we grow our own sage now, right? It's in our front yard. We don't take sage from the land anywhere else. We honor her. We were given her, and we water her. And when we make sage bundles from her and thank her and make offerings. And so it feels very respectful that we can do that. That's one example.
I guess I'll go back to humility again, that I approach my relations in other traditions with great humility and from a place of appreciation, a place of honoring, a place of respect, not a place of, wanting to take or extract, which is so much of Western culture and the way colonial, conquest happened. I can look to my own tradition and relate to being conquested. Stories of the Jewish people, both ancient and modern, times of conquest and of denial of being able to practice what you are at the threat of death or expulsion. And also, unfortunately, looking at modern day, roles being reversed in some ways. The current conflicts in the Middle East, which are going on, it's complicated. It's very complicated. How certain aspects of Judaism have politically manifested in modern life. But in terms of being with and experiencing other traditions, I have experienced great generosity among teachers and elders of other traditions who want to share their ways. I have come to understand that in some ways indigenous thinking is necessary and perhaps a way out of many of our modern troubles if we can get back to the connection with Earth. And so it doesn't mean taking those traditions and making them one's own, but with respect and with honoring those traditions and with permission, being able to share something of them if it's in an appropriate situation. It's not a way to make oneself grander or grandiose or, these people that take certain native ceremonies and then offer them for money and make money on them. That's a absurd appropriation and disrespectful. But to recognize the commonalities as well. I've been with native elders who have also said, it's fine that, we share these ways, and also you need to learn your own indigenous roots and traditions. And well, that was the birth of Passover Village, as we spoke about, that, we've been involved with that now for over 30 years. And so, I think all peoples can meet at a place of mutual respect, understanding, respect for the land, respect for the spirit. All of our traditions come down to that if we allow ourselves to experience that and then live from that point of being. And we have to disengage from the colonialist extractive principles that are based in greed and power that we grew up around in Western culture. That's a struggle all the time because that's what we grew up in this, in this country and in Western civilization.
I went to this incredible training called Singing the Bones with a few indigenous practitioners and a beautiful musician from Appalachia. And so they were teaching us from their traditions. And then throughout the training, so for example, one day was about music. And they said, okay, so your homework is to go and see now what was in your ancient tradition. Look it up. Here are websites. Ask your grandmother. Whatever you can do. Remember when you were 5, what songs were sung to you, what musical instruments bring you aliveness. So that was one example. So always go back to your own and see if you could remember and revive where you came from. One was food. And so then the next week we were all searching what were old recipes and can we start cooking those foods that our grandmother or great-grandmother brought over wherever they came from. It was very profound that I have this instrument that's called a drumstick. First time I heard it, years and years ago, someone was playing it and I just had this visceral, ancient vibration in my body. Like, I don't know why, but I have to have this instrument. And I bought one and I play it every once in a while and it feels so old and like, why do I love this so much? And then I realized it sounds like a lyre, lyre. People say it both ways, Lyre, which is in my ancient tradition. And so I play it, and it feels like I'm playing something from the Middle East, from my ancient plays, and it feels true and important, and it was an aha. Like, it's in our bones. Truly, something is in our bones, and we might need to be immersed with respect and humility with other cultures who are willing to share some wisdom to open you up to the concepts of all my relations and the concepts of food and culture and being with the earth and all of that. And then go back and ask yourself and remember and look at pictures and ask your grandmother and your aunties, and what do you remember? Who are we? Who's the best of us, right? And that will bring you such joy. And I think it makes us, I know it made my ancestors very happy when I started playing that instrument.
Beautiful. What is your prayer?
One of my practices is trying every day to be in the no enemy way. One of our great teachers, Dina Metzger, we need to say her name, amazing, beautiful teacher, writer, activist. I didn't even know that phrase before working with her. Can you have a no enemy attitude every moment? Very hard, especially right now, very hard. And my prayer is that I live the no enemy way so that I can be a vehicle of peace.
Ashe.
My prayer, my most recent prayer and meditation is Great Spirit, Elohai, my Creator, my God, Great Mother, may I serve you always in joy. Because I think that's how we're meant to be living, to be connected to that, service that, our spirit, my spirit is here for a reason, for a purpose, and it's meant to be a joyful service for the sake of the spirit and the earth and all beings in which we come in contact with. So, may I serve in joy.
I have to say one more thing, if I can, given what's going on in the world and that we're from the Jewish Hebrew ancestry, that our greatest prayer is truly peace for every being, every person, every being, every piece of land, that we all put our weapons down. And it starts inside. If I can put my weapons down, can you put your weapons down? And live in peace.
Amen. Aho.
Thank you for asking such intelligent, heartful questions, Robin.
Thank you both so much for being so clear and dedicated to your path and purpose, and for talking to me today.
So now we're going to cry. I am.
Thank you so much for listening today. For more information about Tobi and Marc, you can visit their respective websites, Tobi Fishel, sacredjourneying.com, and Marc Weigensberg, treeoflife.com, or visit the podcast website at anyplacepodcasts.com. This episode was recorded on the traditional homelands of the Tongva people.